Have been imposed under different premises. Some things are consistent. They are all unjustified, unwarranted, and in our judgment, misguided. That's 3,600 workers who are now out of work, not by their choice. Workers who now worry how they're going to put food on the table and pay their bills. Just last evening, workers from Unifor Local 444, with whom I met last week, learned that their auto assembly plant in Windsor will be shutting down for at least the next 2 weeks.
Trump, I'm putting 25% tariffs on Canadian cars. Carney, that's cute. Here's a $2 billion fund to protect our workers and a lesson in basic economics you clearly missed. The new Canadian PM just showed Trump what happens when you pick a trade fight with someone who actually understands trade. In this corner, a former central banker who ran the Bank of England and Canada. In the other corner, a guy who bankrupted casinos. I'm breaking down this economic heavyweight fight that has Trump throwing his phone across the room as Carney calmly explains why tariffs are basically just taxes on Americans. Hey, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. We know you want to. Go ahead, we'll wait. All right, appreciate it. Now back to the video. So Trump woke up one morning and decided the perfect hobby would be destroying international trade relations. Because why have good relationships with your neighbors when you could have chaos instead? The Orange Menace slapped a whopping 25% tariff on Canadian cars without warning, sending shockwaves through both nations' economies. It's like he threw an economic grenade over the border fence and yelled, "Catch this, Canada!"
In the United States, and Donald Trump has announced he is going to double the tariffs imposed on Canadian steel and aluminium.
Governor of Ontario on the weekend saying that he would impose tariffs on electricity coming into the United States. And so Donald Trump, in response, has issued this extremely lengthy tweet, or 50% on steel and aluminium. He seems to be taking no notice of the turmoil in the markets, which have lost all of their gains.
But this isn't just any random industry Trump decided to target. We're talking about the backbone of Canada's export economy here. The auto sector directly provides paychecks to 125,000 Canadians and supports nearly 500,000 jobs in related industries. This isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real people with families, mortgages, and Tim Hortons addictions to support. The impact gets even clearer when you look at the Ambassador Bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor. This single bridge isn't just some concrete structure. It's an economic lifeline pumping a staggering $140 billion worth of goods between the two countries every year. Break that down and you're looking at $400 million crossing that border daily. $400 million every single day. The auto industry particularly depends on this crossing, with parts and vehicles constantly flowing back and forth in a delicate dance that Trump just decided to stomp all over with his tariff tantrum. The timing here raises more red flags than a Chinese military parade. Trump hadn't even bothered to pick up the phone and chat with Canada's newly sworn-in Prime Minister. That's not just bad manners, it's downright bizarre for supposed allies and trading partners. It's like refusing to say hello to your next-door neighbor, but then complaining about their lawn ornaments on social media. And speaking of social media, Trump's attempts to justify these tariffs online read like a kindergartner explaining why the cookie jar is empty. Canada's been very unfair to us on trade. Sure, Donnie, the country that's been your loyal trading partner for decades suddenly became villains overnight. Makes total sense if your brain operates on cartoon logic. What makes this move particularly boneheaded is that American consumer confidence was already circling the drain. The Conference Board reported the Consumer Confidence Index had plummeted to 92.9 in March, the fourth straight monthly decline and the lowest reading since January 2021. As Mark Carney pointed out, Trump's trade war is hurting American consumers and workers. So naturally, the solution is...
You see the numbers are so disproportionate, they're so unfair. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart, and that'll be on other countries to help
Millions of Canadians. We're going to fight these tariffs with countermeasures.
Subsidize a lot of countries and keep them going and keep them in business. In the case of Mexico, it's $300 billion a year. In the case of Canada, it's close to $200 billion a year.
We are going to protect our workers and we are going to build the strongest economy in the G7.
More trade war? That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline and a flamethrower. And the real question is whether this is actually about economics or just Trump throwing a temper tantrum because Canadians gave him the cold shoulder at Carney's election rally. Nothing triggers Trump faster than a crowd not adoring him. His ego is more fragile than a champagne flute in a mosh pit. Why target Canada's auto sector specifically? Because it's strategic in the most vindictive way possible. It hurts a lot of Canadian workers quickly, grabs headlines immediately, and lets Trump flex his tough guy muscles for his base, who eat up this economic nonsense like it's the last hamburger at the White House. The cruel irony? These tariffs are essentially a Trump tax on Americans. When the price of Canadian cars and parts goes up, guess who pays more at the dealership? Not Canada. Everyday Americans. But Trump has never let reality interfere with a good tweet. Mark Carney, campaigning near the Ambassador Bridge, emphasized how crucial this relationship is, while noting that the relationship between the two countries had changed. That's diplomatic speak for Trump's throwing a childish fit, and we're the adults dealing with the consequences.
Yesterday marked the latest in President Trump's unprecedented series of U.S. tariffs that are designed to reshape the international trading system. We received confirmation that the latest reciprocal tariffs will not be imposed on Canada. The ambition of these measures is enormous. The effects on the global economy will be monumental.
The impact doesn't stop at the auto industry either. When you mess with a supply chain this integrated, the ripple effects touch everything from manufacturing to retail. It's like pulling one thread from a sweater and watching the whole thing unravel. Canadian parts cross the border multiple times during production, meaning these tariffs compound with each crossing, multiplying the damage. What's truly baffling is that Trump seems to genuinely believe tariffs are magical money that Canada deposits directly into America's bank account. That's not how any of this works. It's like he skipped economics 101 to attend how to bankrupt casinos 101 instead. While Trump was flunking basic economics, Mark Carney stepped up to show what actual leadership looks like. When confronted with Trump's kindergarten-level tariff tantrum, Carney didn't match the chaos with more chaos. Instead, he delivered something that's become shockingly rare in politics: a calm, fact-based response with an actual plan behind it. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Trump frantically typing all-caps tweets from the bathroom at 3 a.m. versus a man who successfully managed not one, but two national banks addressing the nation with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what they're talking about.
At the same time, President Trump confirmed that the tariffs announced last week against our auto industry will come in, and indeed have come into effect today. Three different sets of U.S. tariffs remain in place and will continue to pose significant threats to Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. So while it's progress that further tariffs were not imposed on Canada yesterday, the President's actions will reverberate here in Canada and across the world.
Let's take a moment to appreciate what happened here. On one side, we have Donald "I declare bankruptcy for fun" Trump, whose idea of economic policy is whatever pops into his head between Fox News segments. On the other side, Carney, a guy who literally ran the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. That's like comparing your uncle who's good with money because he once won $50 on a scratch ticket to Warren Buffett. When Carney took to the podium, you could practically feel the adults returning to the room. No name-calling, no childish insults, no tweets written with the caps lock button apparently stuck under a pile of hamburger wrappers. Just a straight-up rejection of Trump's economic bullying. Carney called the tariffs what they were: a direct attack on Canada, but delivered his assessment with the measured tone of someone explaining a difficult concept to a particularly stubborn 5-year-old. And here's the real kicker. While Trump was busy throwing his economic temper tantrum, Carney was already 3 steps ahead with actual solutions. He announced a $2 billion Canadian strategic response fund specifically designed to protect Canadian auto jobs. That's what real leaders do. They don't just complain about problems, they solve them. I'm not sure Trump even knows what strategic means unless it's followed by the words hamburger reserve.
Today I'm announcing that the Government of Canada will be responding by matching the U.S. approach, with 25% tariffs on all vehicles imported from the United States. Our tariffs, though, unlike the U.S. tariffs, will not affect auto parts because we know the benefits of our integrated production system. And as well, we are developing a framework for auto producers in Canada to get relief from these counter tariffs.
The differences between these two men couldn't be more obvious if they were wearing name tags that said actual economic expert and guy who somehow bankrupted casinos. While Trump's business resume includes a trail of bankruptcies that would make a financial advisor cry, Carney has been steering entire national economies through global crises. One of these men understands monetary policy, the other one thinks the word monetary means he has to pay for lunch. Carney's message to Trump was crystal clear and delivered without the drama. I will reject all attempts to weaken Canada, all attempts to wear us down, to break us down so that America can own us. That will never ever happen. No exclamation points needed, no childish nicknames, just the calm, measured response of someone who understands that running a country isn't the same as hosting a reality TV show. What makes Carney's approach even more impressive is how surgical his economic response will likely be. While Trump swings his tariff hammer around like a toddler who found dad's tools, Carney is carefully selecting pressure points that will maximize impact on American interests while minimizing damage to Canada. He's playing economic chess, while Trump is still trying to figure out how to set up the checkers board. The beauty of Carney's strategy is that it's all based on actual economic understanding rather than gut feelings and whatever happened to make Trump grumpy that morning. When you've led two major central banks, you tend to develop a pretty solid grasp of how international trade actually works. Trump, meanwhile, still seems to believe tariffs are magical money that other countries pay directly to America, which is about as accurate as believing the tooth fairy handles international currency exchange. What's particularly delicious about this whole situation is watching Trump get schooled by someone who actually knows what they're talking about. It's like watching a 5-year-old who claims to be a karate master suddenly facing an actual black belt. All the bluster and bragging suddenly meets reality, and reality tends to win those fights. Carney's approach also highlights another crucial difference between the two men. One relies on facts and expertise, while the other seems to navigate entirely by the seat of his pants and whatever will get the biggest cheer at his next rally. One is focused on protecting jobs and his country's economic interests, while the other seems primarily concerned with how he's perceived on television and whether people are being sufficiently nice to him. Speaking of economic interests, there's a particularly awkward reality Trump doesn't want his supporters to understand about these tariffs. When Trump proudly declares victory over Canada with his 25% tariffs, he's not mentioning who actually pays that bill. And spoiler alert, it isn't Justin Trudeau cutting a check to the US Treasury. The American family shopping for a new car is about to discover who really foots the bill for Trump's economic temper tantrums. This is Economics 101, the kind of basic stuff any first-year student could explain, yet somehow it continues to baffle the former president. Tariffs aren't magical money machines where foreign leaders send cash directly to America. Their tax is paid by American importers who then pass those costs onto American consumers. As anyone with even a shred of economic knowledge understands, when you jack up the cost of imports, prices go up. That's how economics works. Trump's bizarre tariff fantasy is like thinking you can punish your neighbor by setting your own house on fire. Sure, your neighbor might get annoyed by the smoke, but you're the one watching your living room turn to ashes. Every time Trump celebrates these tariffs as some kind of victory lap, economists everywhere collectively facepalm so hard they risk concussion. What makes this particularly problematic for the American auto industry is how the supply chain actually works. Car parts don't just cross the border once, they zigzag back and forth like a drunk tourist trying to find their hotel. A single component might cross the US-Canada border multiple times during production, getting slapped with tariffs at each crossing. By the time a finished car rolls off the assembly line, it might have accumulated several layers of Trump's tariff tax. Imagine baking a cake where you have to pay an extra fee every time you add an ingredient. That's what Trump's doing to American car manufacturers. These companies now face a miserable choice: either absorb these extra costs and watch their profits vanish faster than Trump's hair in a strong wind, or pass those costs directly to American consumers who are already struggling with inflation. Gee, tough decision. The economic ripple effects don't stop there. When car prices jump, people buy fewer cars. When people buy fewer cars, manufacturers need fewer workers. When manufacturers need fewer workers, Well, you get the picture. It's almost like Trump's brilliant job creation strategy involves first destroying a bunch of American jobs. Genius. What's particularly laughable is that Trump continues to brag about these tariffs as if they're some kind of economic masterstroke, when in reality, they're more like an economic faceplant. His previous rounds of tariffs weren't exactly greeted with standing ovations from American businesses or consumers. They were met with higher prices, disrupted supply chains, and a collective groan from the manufacturing sector. Meanwhile, Mark Carney isn't just sitting around waiting for Trump's next Twitter tirade. He's made it crystal clear that Canada has options. We will fight the US tariffs with retaliatory trade actions of our own that will have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impacts here in Canada. Translation: Canada knows exactly which American industries to target for maximum political pain. Carney understands the economic chessboard, while Trump is still figuring out how the pieces move in checkers. The timing couldn't be worse for Trump's tariff tantrum. American consumer confidence has already taken a nosedive, reaching lows not seen since January 2021. Adding a Trump tax to everyday purchases isn't exactly going to make voters feel warm and fuzzy about their economic prospects. Nothing says vote for me quite like I'm going to make everything you buy more expensive. The irony here is almost too perfect. Trump positions himself as the champion of the working class while implementing policies that directly increase costs for those same workers. It's like promising to help someone lose weight by force-feeding them cake. His trade war is hurting American consumers and workers, and it will hurt more. And that's not just Carney's opinion, that's economic reality. Well, folks, we've just watched a masterclass in how to handle a bully. Trump thought he could scare Canada with his tariff tantrum, but instead, Mark Carney showed exactly why he's the adult in this relationship. The confrontation between these two couldn't be more different. Carney staying composed and strategic while Trump went full volcano mode on social media. It's like watching a chess grandmaster play against someone who thinks knocking over all the pieces means you win. The lesson here is crystal clear. When someone's throwing economic punches they don't understand, sometimes the most powerful response isn't matching their crazy, it's showcasing your calm.